Hello and welcome to 3D modeling video number 69. In this video, I'll teach you how you can bake a diffuse map. I've been talking a lot about normal maps and how we can bake them, but I want to also teach you how you can bake other things using 3ds Max, like diffuse maps. So first of all, I've got my high polygon geometry here with the color scheme that I would like. I've got green, yellow, red, and different shades of gray here. You can have, you can have as many shades of gray as you'd like. You can have 25, 50, 100, and that can help to differentiate your different pieces of geometry. Just because it's metal doesn't mean it needs to be the same gray as all the other metals. So you can have different amounts of brightness. But before I start with that, I just want to make sure that you've got the process down for how we can create a low polygon mesh. Just real quick, what you need to do is I'll go ahead and delete. What you need to do is you need to determine which parts of your geometry will be symmetrified and which parts will have mirrored UVs, mirrored textures. So decide that, and then I can go ahead. I decide that, for example, this piece of geometry and this one will be mirrored, whereas this one and this one will have unique textures on the left and the right side. So now that I've determined that, I'll go ahead and delete the left side. And for this pipe, the left side is already deleted. And now what you do is you attach them all together, and then you go ahead and unwrap the UVs, or UVWs. And now you create your UVWs here, and of course this is not the most efficient use of space because you've got a lot of areas here that are just empty, and we can go ahead and take some objects, some shells, and move them into here and perhaps rotate them. And of course keep in mind that your angle snap here will also work the same in your UV editor. So if I rotate this, it's rotating by 22.5. So you can go ahead and rotate it and scale it to make sure that you have the most efficient use of space. And then you can take the small objects and just stick them anywhere because they're smaller and not as important. So that's how you can get a more efficient use of space and just make sure everything is within the big box here. So you connect them all together, you go ahead and unwrap them. Then you go ahead and you detach all the objects. And right now, lighting and shadow, hardware shading has been turned on. It sometimes turns on, so you want to go ahead and disable that. The reason that we detach them all as separate objects is because it's much easier to bake that way. Because when you have objects that are close together, that can be much more difficult to bake, and it can give you all sorts of errors and just normal maps that don't look that good. Because the wrong parts will be baked to the wrong object. So parts of this mesh or the high polygon mesh will be baked into this and vice versa. So you want to go ahead and render the texture of each piece individually and then combine them in a program like Photoshop. When you render, choose a format that has transparency, and that way when you're combining all the textures in Photoshop, they won't overlap each other. So be sure to choose a format with transparency. You don't want to use JPEG. You want to use something like PNG or TIFF or other high quality formats that support transparency. And then once you're ready to bake it, then you go ahead and add the symmetry modifier. Because now when you bake it, the textures will be mirrored. So getting back to this, I'll go ahead and select my low polygon mesh, and then I'll go ahead and select the high polygon mesh. And then I'll go ahead and make sure I've got the right pieces selected, and I'll go ahead and isolate. Alright. And of course, if I click on pieces of the high polygon mesh, you can see that Turbo Smooth is turned on. Iteration 0, render iterations 2. I'll go ahead and select the low polygon mesh, and I'll go ahead and press 0, or you can go to rendering, render to texture. Now that you're here, what you want to do is you want to go ahead and right now normal's map is on because I've been baking normal maps. I want to go ahead and delete this and click on add diffuse map. Here you can set the name, the format, the image format, and the folder. So I'll go ahead and click here. I will specify a format of, let's say, PNG. And it will use the name of the object, which is low 01 in this case, and it will attach diffuse map to the end of it. Now different game engines have different rules for what you want to name your different textures. So if I wanted to follow the rules of the game engine, I would call it something like low 01 and call it diff at the end. However, it's not important in this case because I will still be combining them together in Photoshop and saving the final format there. So it's not really important here. And here you want to make sure that alpha channel is clicked on. Otherwise, it will not create an alpha channel. Alpha channel is what gives your image diffuse transparency. And then you can set the size. Remember that the 2048 by 2048 is not the limit. You can go higher. You can go up to 8192. You can always enter a higher number here, but so I'll go ahead and choose 1024 by 1024, and then I'll go ahead and render. To see the full image, what you can do is you can scale this down a bit. Make sure it's all visible, and then you can go ahead and zoom out a little bit using the mouse scroller. So the rendering that you're seeing here is just the standard render using the default light. I can see some parts of this are dark and some parts of this are lighter. That's because it's using the default light that's located that's aligned with your camera, and it's located right behind your camera, so that when you rotate your camera, you notice that the middle is lighted or is lit, and then the surroundings are darker. So that's your standard default light. So that's the render that you see in that preview. When you actually go look at your texture, the one that you specified here, you will see a different image. So this is the actual texture that we got, and as you can see, there's no shading or lighting or reflections here. There's other types of maps which do have, reflections and shadows if you like to render those. But for this video, I'll just be dealing with the diffuse. So this is the diffuse texture that we got here. And now I'm going to go ahead and do the same for all the other objects, and I'll get back to you once I've combined them all, opened them up in Photoshop. So here I am with all 4 diffuse textures baked for all 4 objects. You can see here they are in Photoshop, and because I used the PNG format, the transparency was saved. So first problem, you can see that the object is aligned to the top right. That's where its UVW is, that's where its UV shell is, and that's where I want it to be for all the other objects. However, let's say I just take this and drag it into, I want to combine them all into one texture, one Photoshop file. So I'll just go ahead and take it and drag it, and it's in a different position now. So how do we fix this? Well, it's actually a very simple solution. You just go ahead and hold Shift as you drag. If you hold Shift and drag into a different file, it will remember the orientation, and now it's here. So you can go ahead and close this one. And we can do the same for this. Just hold Shift, same orientation, and we'll do the same for this one as well. So I have not fixed the UVW yet, because to have a more efficient use of space, you would go ahead and rotate and scale up your shells to make use of this space. So this is not a great example of using your space. There's a lot of wasted space here. But just know that if you're doing this professionally for your own projects, you don't want to have this wasted space. Just go ahead and scale the objects to use more of the space. And then you can just go ahead and, for example, apply black to the bottom. So here is our basic diffuse map. And you can see some parts of this are red. You can see a little bit of red here. That has to do with whenever an area, a part of the model, does not receive any geometry to bake, it will render that as red. So we just need to adjust let's see. We just need to adjust the cage so that it covers more of the area and that we don't have any red. But since we now have colors for each area, we can use this to quickly texture our object in Photoshop. So here is a photo reference, a metal texture that I want to use for my model. I'll just go ahead and press Ctrl A and Ctrl X to just go ahead and cut it. I'll go to this one and I'll go ahead and press Ctrl V to paste it in there. And I can also go to Edit, Transform, Scale, and scale it down. Scale it to fit the image. And now I can use the colors. Let me go ahead and hide the black background. I can now go use my magic wand tool. I can make sure I have the tolerance set to a good number here. And if I click this, I need to make sure I'm on the right layer, this one. If I click this, you can see it selects both shades of gray because the tolerance is too high. If I change it to a low tolerance, like 5 for example, when I select the gray, it only selects this shade of gray. So the higher the tolerance, the more colors it will select that are similar to this color. So this gray is similar to this gray, so if the tolerance is too high, it will select both of them. So you want to make sure that the tolerance is very low. Even if you set it to 0, it will now be very strict about selecting only this color. Only the color you select. Make sure you're in the right layer. And so if you wish to, let's say I've got this part of the geometry, the texture which is red, yellow in the middle with gray. Let's say I want to select all of the screws, the nuts here in the middle. If I select them one by one, that will take a long time, especially if you've got like dozens and hundreds of these things. So what we can do is we can go to the layer, press Control, and click on the layer thumbnail. This will select all the contents of this layer, including this and this. That's a quick way to quickly select whatever is on that layer. So let's say I want all the gray parts to have this metal texture. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and hold Control here. I can go ahead and merge these two layers, or let's see, I gotta make sure I have the right layers. Right, this one and this one. I'll go ahead and merge them. And then I'll go ahead and use the magic wand tool to select the gray parts. Or what I'll do instead is I'll go ahead and hold Control and click on this. And then I can use the magic wand tool to deselect the colored areas that I don't want to be part of the texture. And then I will move the texture up above here just for reference, and I can add a mask to the texture. And now all of the gray areas have this metal texture on them. And of course I can set it to something like multiply or overlay or soft light. Those are good options. And that way, if you scroll your mouse wheel, you can quickly change between the layer modes. So this way, if you just use normal, it just has the basic photo texture. If you choose like multiply, overlay, or soft light, it will still make use of the object's color. One thing I forgot is this one right here as well. So I'm going to go ahead and select this, and I'm going to go back into this layer's mask, and I'll go ahead and make sure I have a white here, and I'll go to Edit, Fill, Foreground Color. And let's see. Oh, okay, I need to put this below here actually. Okay, there we go. So the way masks work in Photoshop is that in your mask layer, everything that's black is made invisible, everything that's white is visible. And of course, if you have gray, the lighter the gray, the more it will be visible, and the darker, the less visible. And the reason you want to use masks is that you can hide parts of your layer without having to delete it. So it's very useful for that. And I'm going to go ahead and choose a different metal texture to put on the rest of the pieces. Now here I've chosen a different metal texture, and I'll go ahead and cut it and copy it. Cut it and paste it. And this one I want to be exclusively for this part. So I'll go ahead and put it above here. Hold Control for this layer. Go into here, create a mask, and there you go. And it automatically takes the selected parts and adds it to the white part here. So it creates a mask that's black, and with the white is the selection. So it takes the selection and makes it white in the mask. So now I'll go ahead and set it to overlay. And actually I'll do the same for the green part. So I'll go ahead and select this layer. And I'll go ahead and remove some parts. So now I've got a basic texture, a basic diffuse texture. And now I'm going to go ahead and save it out, and we'll see what it looks like back in 3ds Max. So here we are back in 3ds Max, and here is the texture that we just created in Photoshop. Honestly, it's not looking very good at the moment. If you want to use Photoshop to texture objects, you should take more time and add scratches and dents and dust and all sorts of things. In the future, I'll be showing you different ways that you can texture your geometry to get all sorts of great results. But this is just a quick basic introduction to how you can render out a diffuse map and then use Photoshop to add different types of textures to different parts of your diffuse map. Thank you for watching.